What if sales calls were completely optional for your high ticket business? Well, my next guest is going to reveal the secret to over $100 million in revenue using the strategy we're about to talk about. All right, Brody, what were you sharing with me just a second ago?
Okay, what if you could have 100, 1,000, or tens of thousands of sales calls all at once? Or, as Tony Robbins just did, 1.25 million sales calls all at once. Live and virtual events are the biggest untapped resource in the high ticket space. And here's something really, really, really special about them that not many people are sharing with you. Events have been around for 300,000 years. They have been at the foot of every single social movement, political movement, or progression in society, from civil rights movements through to a whole range of different things as well. Apple uses them to do big product launches. I used to work for Apple, and I used to train on how to sell one-to-many at Apple. And Tesla uses them for their product launches. Donald Trump's political rallies. Everyone in the high ticket space it's hammered into them. You've got to have sales calls, sales calls, sales calls. But what if you could bypass sales calls, make them optional? Of course, we're never going to get rid of them completely and have 100, 1,000, tens of thousands, or even a million sales calls all at once. That's what I'm here to talk to you about today.
Wow, this is really exciting. So, in this episode of the Marketing Minds podcast, we've got Brody Lee, who, as he just mentioned, is a former event planner and coordinator over at Apple, ran some of the big events that Apple has done. And now he's working with high ticket businesses to make sales calls optional. He's done over $100 million in client revenue, over 1,200 events, 100 years of combined experience with his team that he has at eventconsulting.co. So Brody, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And with that Apple stuff as well, I'm just going to say that off the bat. So Steve would do his big product launches, and then my job was to translate the millions of people that would come into our stores on how to actually get them to buy high ticket products like iPhones and whatnot. And so I was training their leadership and executive teams. I would run large training events on how to sell one to many. And then we would go into the stores, and instead of selling one to one, which Apple's known for, we'd place someone at the foot of the table and they'd be facilitating 40 sales calls at once. So I learned a thing or two from Steve. And I learned a thing or two from doing that. And now we're applying this in the high ticket space. And it's really, really cool and a lot of fun because it's such an untapped resource. I would say probably only 5% of people in our industry are doing this. And as we know, supply of human connection is dropping at the moment. AI, we've got all this social media, all that sort of stuff, which are great tools, but people are saying that they feel more disconnected than ever. And so what I know to be true about events is that when you provide somebody with an experience, loyalty increases, trust increases, and they're more likely to stay with you over the long term as well because they had that in-person experience with you as opposed to a 45-minute sales call. Can you really understand them? Can you really get into their world enough to know that your product is right for them? That's why I'm a huge fan of events.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to dive in here because I'm actually working with Brody on a virtual event that I have coming out soon. Although by the time you're watching this, it'll already have been a great success. We might have some more on the horizon, so stay tuned for that. But I'm really excited to get everything that you share, Brody, in the world of events. We're going to be diving deep. That's what we do here on this podcast. Now, one of the things that I think really struck me is what you learned at Apple and how you're translating that to these events, because I think a lot of people are used to the one-to-one sales, especially in high ticket coaching and consulting. And one of the big challenges I know a lot of people face is having their salespeople sell as well as they do. They're getting high 30, 40, 50% enrollment rates or even higher in some cases. And then they have sales team members that, could be getting 20% on a good day. And so how do you really think about the difference between going and doing an event one-to-many versus one-to-one sales? And what makes it actually a more powerful opportunity, especially for founders that sell better than their team?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say look at the economics of it, first of all, right? So in order for you to say your team closes at 20% to get 20 people into your program, you would need to schedule 100 calls that actually show up to be able to do that, which is a tall order. Think about the amount of time that needs to go into that. That's 100 hours of your team's time. And then, say, for example, you have a $20,000 offer, you're paying out a minimum of 10% commissions to those people. So 20 times 2, right? So was that 2,000 times 20? That's $40,000 that you're paying out in commissions to those people. Now, do you really want to spend that money? And the answer for me is no. I would prefer to be paid for the privilege of me pitching to people. I want them to pay me. People come to an event, they pay you for the event, and then you sell to them as well. And so the upside for me is that there's less commissions, there's less managing of the team. We know that closers, don't get me wrong, I have closers on my team and all of the respect to them as well. We're not going to get rid of them completely. But at the same time, the amount of work and effort that goes into managing those teams, salespeople, we have to keep them very, very highly motivated so that they really buy into what they're selling. And so I just find that events are just a much more powerful way to connect with your audience. And also for me, like I'm somebody that really, really enjoys being in front of people. And so part of me in terms of my mission of like having a genuine impact on people's lives, I want that direct line with the people that I'm signing up. I want to be able to build a relationship with them. That's not just a 45-minute call because somebody's seen an ad or some content. I want to be able to really nurture that. What we know as well is that in addition to like the economics and all of that sort of stuff, when you look at churn rates for people that come in via sales calls, they are actually higher than people that come in via an event. And the reason for that is really, really simple. We know that people need at least 20 touch points with you, I think Google said recently, before they are ready to purchase. But if you put them in an intensive environment over multiple days, they have this immersive experience with you. And so the bond that's created between you and them, you're not just a talking head like we are right now on a podcast or in an ad or whatever. You're a real live human being in the flesh that they develop a deep connection with. And because of that, the loyalty increases, and then they're more likely to stay with you over the long term.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really interesting thing that a lot of people don't think about, which is after the sale, how does selling from an event actually increase and affect things? So I think that's a really fascinating thing. And we're going to dive deeper into some of that. We're going to dive deeper into the impact focus. I know there's some exciting things that you have on your vision board, and we'll talk about that. But before we get into that, what I'd love to do is just understand what your overall formula is for a successful virtual event, because you've had $1 million, virtual events, and not saying all of them are $1 million events. It's different for different companies, but you've had $1 million events that you've run. Can you break down what the formula is for that and what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a 5-step system that we use that's very straightforward. And I'm just going to rattle off the steps really quickly, then I'll dive into them. So it's set up, show up, blow up, pay up, and scale up. I want to make it really simple for people to remember. So the setup piece of this is around setting up an events ecosystem that fits within what you're already doing in your business and bolts on to what's already working. I'm not suggesting that everyone cancels their sales teams, that they throw their programs out or anything like that. We want to find what's already working and then bolt on events so that we can help them to have a large influx of clients at once. And what this does is that it allows us to eliminate some of the frictions that happen around sales calls. So that's number one. So it's setup, so setting up an event ecosystem, getting them ready from a psychological point of view to be open to receiving that many clients at once. One of the questions that I ask people is, if I was to give you 100 new clients today in one day, what would break first? And it's usually, well, I would break first. And so we have systems to ensure that that doesn't happen. And so we want to make sure that these are aligned with their impact and their income goals as well. The second piece of the puzzle is show up, and that's, we want people to show up to your event. So how do we fill it with highly qualified people? And this is the part that a lot of people miss. We want to make sure that before the event, they are pre-sold on working with you and ready to buy your high ticket offer. So we do a lot of engineering and a lot of programming in the pre-event communications and the relationships that we build with them to ensure that they are primed and ready before they come to the event. Then the next piece is blow up. So blow up is all about blowing their minds with inspiring content and delivery. And what we talk about here is that we want people to be touched, moved, and inspired at the event and so that it pushes them closer into being in that buyer's pocket. They've already been nudged a little way along in the internal marketing once they've registered before they get to the event. And then at the event itself, we want them to have an experience where their minds are blown and they're like, okay, cool, like I have to work with this person. And then the other piece on this is that a lot of people think about the pitch, the sell that they're making from stage as an event within the event. They're like, oh, I'm going to deliver all of this content and then I'll just make an offer. But what we find is that if we engineer everything that comes out of, say, for example, your mouth, Alaric, next week at the event, which we've done a lot of work on that, we engineer it with the sale in mind. And everything is carefully curated through the event to handle objections before they come up, to help people get closer to the goal, but then leave an opening for you to be able to make an offer that solves all of the challenges that come up for them at the event. We actually see that conversions increase. And so the fourth step of this is called pay up. Now, obviously, we want people to pay up and pay up big for your offers. And so part of the pay up piece is obviously we need an offer that we call it the offer that sells itself. And this is about making the right offer at the right time to the right audience. And this is what I mean in terms of engineering things, is that we get them to be in the right moment of time to hear that offer. And then we obviously need to master the art and science of selling from stage or platform pitching. And so there's a whole process that we need to do here to be able to get people from I'm thinking about this to a full body yes, I call it. And we take people up to something I call the line of decision demarcation, whether it's either a full body, yes, I'm going to step off the cliff and join you, or it's going to be a really clear no. I don't want people sitting in indecision. And so we make sure at the event we are very, very clear on getting them to that point and supporting them to make the right decision for them. I don't actually care if I do care if they say yes, but what I want them to do is make a decision, because events really at the end of the day are all about people making decisions around what's right for them. And then part of that also in terms of the pitch process is managing the influx of clients. So I mentioned before, like 100 new clients at once, what would happen? And so we obviously want to help people to be able to ensure that they can onboard those people properly, and so that the trust is built and people are really excited and there's nothing lost in that process. And then the last piece of the puzzle is the scale up piece. And so scale up is around three things. First of all, we want to make sure that people master the art of paid traffic arbitrage. So we want people to be able to scale their events. And so we have a whole thing on how we actually get paid traffic to be able to get people to the event. The second piece of this is we want them to develop an incredible team around them, whether they're doing a live event or a virtual event, to ensure that that they're supported and that the participants are supported. And the last piece of that puzzle in terms of scaling up is driving profitability. So once we have the foundations in and we've got the events rocking and rolling, after about 3 events, we know our numbers really, really well, and then we can scale up the wazoo.
I love it. I love how systematized every single step is. I know one of the things that you've shared is that, simple scales and complex fails.
Yeah,
How do you, kind of combine, right? I know that's one of the things you talk about. How do you combine that simplicity while still also having that creativity and that, kind of extra impact to create that success that people are looking for? How do you balance simplicity and creativity?
Yeah, it's hard. I come from an instructional design background, part of the training that I did at Apple, right? And so one of the things that it's really, really important from an event delivery point of view is that a lot of people, we've all been to those events where the speaker is this monotone, boring person, whether it's death by PowerPoint slides, all that sort of stuff. And part of the simplicity of the model that I teach is that we actually want participants to be working harder than you. And what I mean by that is the amount of time that you actually spend teaching in, for example, a session should only really be about 20 minutes. And that's how we make it simple, right? And what we're doing is we're imparting information. Then we'll work with the participant and the group, and we will build whatever we're teaching live in front of everyone. And then we will send them off to build this thing on their own as well. And so at our events, what we want is that we don't want them to walk away with a to-do list, but with the work actually done. And so we simplify it down into really core elements of what do they need to be able to get across that line so that they're closer to the buying pocket. And then we strip away all of the other stuff around it so that we have this one clear pathway to the offer. And I think, I think the biggest challenge for somebody that's got so much to give, and I know you and I are like that, right? Like we want to just give so much value, and I still struggle with this to this day. I'm not perfect at this myself. Is that we want to teach everything, we want to give them everything we've got because we want to demonstrate our expertise. But when people are sitting in a room in a learning environment, there's only so much that their brain can handle. And so we keep it to those 20-minute blocks so that they get an incredible experience and they walk away from the event feeling like I've actually accomplished something as well.
Absolutely. This was one of the biggest takeaways for me going through your process, is the fact that you don't want to just teach the full hour or do 45 minutes. What a lot of people do is, let's say you got an hour block of time. Most people would say, okay, well, I'm going to teach for 45 minutes and then I'm going to have 15 minutes of Q&A. And sometimes there's a time and a place for that, which I know we've talked about with certain elements. But usually what you want to do is exactly what you said, is this different, more counterintuitive approach. Teach for 20 minutes, then go in and have people do exercises and then go back and forth on that and actually have it be more of that workshop model. Could you break that down a little bit more, especially for the listener or the viewer who's watching right now? What exactly does that look like? How would you distill, let's say, an idea that's going to be one presentation into a 20-minute presentation? Then what are the types of things that you would do? Maybe you could just give me an example of that type of exercise?
Yeah, so look, I think what we need to think about when we're doing this is the whole point of your event is handling objections. And because you want to pre-handle the objections before you get to your offer. And so there's three types of objections that exist. There's vehicle, internal, and external objections. So vehicle objections are, I don't believe that this strategy is right for me. An internal objection, what's going on in their head is, I don't believe that I can execute this strategy. And the external objections are the BS objections. I'm not sure if I can swear on this podcast, but they're the BS objections of time, money, and spouse. The things that not really objections, they're usually a smokescreen for the other two. And so when we're constructing each session, we're looking at, okay, what am I delivering in this 20-minute block that's going to give either someone the strategy that they need to be able to go to the next level, or at least to get some momentum, or an internal belief of theirs that they can't do this will be collapsed, right? And so if I think about, for example, a training that I have is the event content creator, which is exactly on this thing. And what we do for 20 minutes in that is we look at all of the different things they could possibly teach. And then we boil it down into three core elements for their event, just three big secrets, if you want to call them, that we're going to deliver at the event. And in that 20 minutes, I teach on it and I demonstrate what I'm doing at my event. These are the three big secrets. And then I bring somebody up on stage, and for 20 minutes, we'll build out theirs. And then for the next 20 minutes, I'll send them away, and then they'll do it as on their own for their own events. We'll do a little bit of a recap. They might share at their table. Here's the other thing as well. The more that you can get your participants sharing with each other, the better. People report back that the most valuable parts of events for them are not necessarily the content, but the relationships that they cultivate. So if you can be that person that helps cultivate more and more relationships to engineer conversations with them, their trust in you increases because they don't feel like you're just hammering them with your content.
Yeah. And I think that makes so much sense. And translating that to a virtual event, I think is a really interesting thing that people are going to be interested in. Now, I want to dive deeper into the tactics and some of the strategies. And I know there's some secret things we're going to cover in just a second. But before we get into that, what's the tech setup? What do you usually see, in terms of doing these virtual events? Now, I know a little behind the scenes because I've been going through this process. Mm-hmm. I know it might be different for different people, but how do you create that strong feel, that connection in a virtual environment? What have you found works the best?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that all you need to run in a virtual event is your iPhone. Right? It has an amazing camera on it. Your computer has great cameras as well, but there's this amazing app called Ecamm, which is the first bit of tech that I'll give you. And Ecamm allows you to use your iPhone as a camera, and this iPhone can sit anywhere. You've got a little thing, and it's funny. I just saw this on my screen. I'm not sure if you guys can see this. And when we're talking about events, what we're trying to do is create revolutions disguised as gatherings. That's part of our marketing.
That's good.
First of all, I don't want people to think, oh my God, I have to have this whole studio set up and stuff like that. That's not necessary. A simple computer app called Ecamm and your iPhone is good enough, and the iPhone cameras are incredible. I have a lovely view of New York City out here, so often I do this in my living room. I don't necessarily live in the studio the whole time. But I think one of the other parts of this in terms of a setup is what you're doing with Zoom and the tools that you have available to you. So Zoom, I find, is the most effective mechanism to run a virtual event for a variety of different reasons. But one of them is the ability for you to be able to engage with people live in chat, bring them up on the screen, and actually create an experience like they are actually in a live event with you. I don't like webinar setups, like where you can only chat to them in the chat. I want people to be able to engage with me and feel like they're actually physically present and live with me. If you have a look at somebody like Tony Robbins' events, that's what he does. He does Zoom meetings and he has them all stitched together and people up on screen so that he can engage with those people. And it creates a more live event-like feel. The other part of this is obviously you want to engage with people, et cetera, et cetera. But in order to be able to engineer those moments where people are connecting with each other, we send them into breakout rooms frequently. And we give them instructions around what they're doing. And the feedback that we often get from people is that those breakout rooms are similar to people talking at a table at a live event, are the most valuable part of the event. It also helps you out when it comes to conversion as well, because once people get a sense of the community that they're around, the type of people they're around, when you present an offer to them, they've already got anchored into their minds the people that they're going to be around in your program or whatever it is that you're offering. And so we mix up those things as well. So yeah, we mix up those breakout rooms so that they get to different people. But other than that, as long as you've got a good lighting, a decent camera, and Zoom, you're pretty much set. We use a whole range of different things if you really want to amp things up. I have flashing lights in this studio. We do a lot of dancing. I have an an Elgato Stream Deck that allows me to flip between different screens and worksheets and stuff like that. But most people overcomplicate it at their first events. iPhone and Zoom, and you're set to go.
Awesome. Now, in a second, I'm going to ask about the difference between the events that you've done that have produced $1 million results and what you've seen unique about them. We'll talk about that in a second. But before, we got to talk about how there's always win or learn. You know, the entrepreneur's mindset. And I know we're actually going to be diving into that at the virtual event that we're hosting together coming up shortly here. I've got the coin, the win or learn entrepreneur's mindset coin, right? This is something we send out to clients, to win on one side or to learn on the other. So even things that feel like failures, it's a learning lesson. And sometimes you can even pivot them quickly. So what I'm curious about, this comes from, I think you were telling a couple stories. We've been to, at different masterminds together. So you're telling me, I think, a story of an event that kind of flipped around, right? But this could be any event that you're thinking about. You tell an example of an event that at first it felt like a failure. Maybe you weren't getting the conversions you were looking for, or the energy you were looking for, but then you were able to learn from that and quickly pivot it into a massive success.
Yeah. The first event I ever ran in this industry. After my time at Apple, I came into this industry. We won't get into my backstory. It was a whole chaotic thing, as most people's are before they come in. And I was running an event. So I lived in Australia at the time. I now live in New York City. I'm Australian, obviously, if you couldn't tell from the accent. And I put on this road show. It was in my first kind of 3 months of being in this business. And I went around the country, and I was so naive and green to this space that I boosted a Facebook event. This was back in like early 2019, late 2018. I boosted this Facebook event, and 40 people responded that they were coming. And this was on the other side of the country, in Perth, and I didn't know anyone in Perth. I had like one friend there, and her son actually came to the event because I kind of begged them to come. But 40 people, so it was great. I had the room set up for 40 people. And then 6:45, no one was there yet. 7, no one was there. That's when we were supposed to start. 7:15, one person showed up. And I was like mortified. I felt so much shame because one of my best friends and her son were there. And then this person walked in, and I had a choice to make at that point. Is, do I cancel this whole thing and then just like, sorry, like there's no one here? And I wanted to, like, there was a part of my soul that was just like, this is horrible. Or do I deliver for this person? So I sat down for a 3-hour coaching session with this person, and I made $20,000. And that $20,000 tipped me across. It was in the first 10 weeks of my business. It tipped me across my first $100,000 in sales in my business. And that was a really, really unique moment for me, because first of all, what it taught me, that like the lesson was that show up regardless. And events are a high risk strategy. I don't want to like pull the wool over anyone's eyes here. Events are the highest risk acquisition strategy that is available. And it's also the highest reward strategy when you get it right. So when you have the right system behind you, like our $1 million events model, the 5-step system I share with you, it makes it easier to be able to succeed. And so that was the first lesson. It was like regardless of what happens, show up anyway. The second one was the second lesson in that was that I was never going to let a room be empty ever again. And so part of that was me figuring out the acquisition model to get people to show up to events. And in 2020 in September. So actually, I had just come back from Tony Robbins' house. This is in March. I was at Tony Robbins' house in Sun Valley in Idaho. And I just got back, and Australia shut down our borders. And we weren't allowed to leave the country for the next 2 years, obviously, with everything going on back then. And I had 36 events booked around the world. 36 weeks of travel and events booked around the world in 2020. And overnight, I lost millions of dollars. And it was devastating. And we just thought, okay, cool, this thing isn't going to last. And we weren't aware that the borders were going to be shut down for two years at that point. And then, so we rescheduled some of our Australian events. They kept pushing lockdowns and whatnot. And by about early July, I was like, this thing is not going away. So we need to do something. And so I decided to put on a virtual event. And at the time, virtual events were not a thing. No one had studios. People were still doing webinars in their kitchen with the cat in the back and the kids screaming around and everything. We hadn't quite figured it out yet. And my team groaned. They were not happy with the idea at all. And I was like, no. What we're going to do is we're going to hold people on Zoom for 16 hours a day for 3 days. And they're going to come in, and then by the end of it, they'll leave more energized than when they came. And they will say it's the best event they've ever been to. And my team know that I have crazy ideas. So at the time, they kind of just rolled their eyes. And I was like, no, we're committed to this. So we put on a virtual event. We did completely organically and had 200 people at this event. people were hungry. We called the event Impact because I wanted to change the narrative of what was happening around the world. I'm like, let's do something that's going to be really, really great and have a genuine impact on people's lives. And so on the second day, I kind of got an inkling. I'm like, well, there's actually something here. This event's quite special. We had a phenomenal experience. I've set up like a makeshift studio with $39 IKEA lights and stuff in the background, and we had flashing things, we had dancing, we had like I really put a lot of effort into the engineering of this event. And at the end of that second day, I was like, well, I think maybe I should sell something. I hadn't really figured out that I was going to make an offer. I was just trying to like do something really cool. And so I wrote down the offer on the back of a piece of paper, and it was like the proverbial napkin. And I sent it to my team. And the next day I presented the offer and I made $1 million. And I kind of fell off my chair because I hadn't made $1 million from an event previously. And then something just kind of like awoken in me. And I'm like, wow, this is an amazing acquisition system in this space as well. And I'd had proof that it had worked in other industries, but for whatever reason, I hadn't fully committed to it yet as an acquisition system. And also the virtual idea, like I was supposed to be doing in-person events that year. So it opened up a whole new avenue for me. And then the next year I made 3.5 million from my own stages virtually, and then kind of went on from there. So the lesson of that first one of like obviously deliver regardless. And then the lesson for the next one is because I kept doing these sorts of events, right? Was like, there's so many different mechanisms for you to be able to achieve the impact that you want. It doesn't necessarily need to be in person. And now we do both. We do both live and virtual. I prefer live personally. I just much prefer being in connection with people, but they're both as effective. Virtual events obviously more cost effective to put on, but I just prefer the in person. Just there's something about being tactile with people and hugging them and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love also the story, and that's the exact same story. I think you told me one of the first times that we met in person. It's just it really is a great example of that entrepreneur's mindset of saying, okay, how can I? And you kind of told two stories here, right? With the first one, with the event where you had one person there. How can I maximize this? Right? Not give up. You're here, and there's a reason this person showed up, and it worked out, right? And it doesn't always work out, but it's one of those things where you learn so much from that and you learn a lesson. And then same thing with the virtual event you did as, the very first one, doing over $1 million. I want to talk about some of your biggest $1 million event tips in just a second. We're going to get there in a second. Okay. By the, and I know it's same thing with events. So we'll do a little inside baseball. These are what are called open loops. Right, so we're opening up some loops here. So we'll get there in a second.
The last few weeks, you've learned
exactly. Got to apply these strategies. That being said, and actually, honestly, I know you talk a lot about this too. So we might even go into that. So another open loop. Let's talk about open loops. What are the big differences with in-person events and virtual? And what are some of the things to look for with in-person? So I feel like we were talking a lot about the virtual side of events. What do you look for in person? What are some things that are common mistakes or pitfalls that people can avoid? Because I think, like you said, there is a little bit higher risk, especially with the in person where you're committing to money to pay for these event space, all the things like that. Mm-hmm. So, what are some of those things you look for in person? How do you mitigate that risk? How do you make that a success?
So the number one thing that people make the mistake of doing is trying to run their event at a loss before it's begun. What I mean by that is that they spend all of this money on hotels, they spend all of this money, on venues and then hotels and then speakers and all that sort of stuff. And then basically by the time they're pitching, they're actually trying to make up a shortfall because they've invested so much money in it. So I want all of my events and my clients' events to be cash positive before they begun. I'm probably wondering, well, how do you do that? Sponsorship and ticket sales. And so sponsorship, my goal is to cover all of the costs of the event and sponsorship. And so whether or not you're putting on an event at a small event of 20 people, you can still get a sponsor to come along and give you some cash to help cover those costs. And the other part around sponsorship, just to tack onto that, is that most people think of sponsorship as let's just have a booth. Let's just put some people at a booth with some nice leaflets and people staff it all day. But for me, when people come to my events, I want them to have an experience that is like nothing they've had before. And so what I say is that we want people to feel like they are entering a different world, and the sponsors play a really important part of that. I want people to be stripped away from everything that's happening outside. So I actually mandate that my sponsors create what we call an activation zone, meaning that they can't just show up with a table and some flyers and whatnot. They have to create an experience for people. I'll give you an example. A really great way to do this and to provide something that's going to be great for your audience is that we want activation zones and the entire event to speak to 5 different anchors. So there's an auditory anchor, there's a kinesthetic anchor, there is a visual anchor, there's an olfactory and a gustatory anchor, so like smell and taste. And so get a local barista or a coffee roasting people, ask them how much it'll cost for your 2-day event for them to supply everyone with coffee. Everyone needs coffee. Hotel venue coffee is crap. We all know that, right? You might have to pay a fine to the hospital, sorry, not to the hospital, to the event venue. Sure, pay that fine. Say it's going to cost us $7,000 for us to put this on. You go, great, I'm supporting a local business. Sold. You go to a sponsor and say, what if I could guarantee you foot traffic of 90% of the people that are coming to my event? A sponsor goes, hell yes. They sponsor this coffee roasting experience and they get to have conversations with people at the coffee zone where they're getting a visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory experience of this roasting thing. And then you charge the sponsor $21,000 for the privilege of doing it. You're 14 grand ahead at that point. It's covered the fine from the venue as well if they're that nasty and they decide to give you one. And then you're ahead. And that covers off some of the other costs of your venue. Maybe it covers off the cost of your AV or whatever it is. And so what it does for us, though, is it creates trust with our audience that we're really paying attention to their experience. And so the big difference between virtual and in-person that I think that most people make the mistake of doing is that they treat their in-person event like it's just a seminar that people come to. They sit down, they listen to some people on stage. But when I think about the most amazing events that I've ever been to, I walk into that room and something touches me in a way that I wasn't expecting. Or there is something that happens at the event that kind of cuts in left of field and makes me think about something differently. And so I saw an event recently inside the venue, like inside the room, they had a jumping castle. It wasn't one of my events. But they had a jumping castle. And at any time somebody felt like they needed to get a bit of energy, they would run over and just jump on the jumping castle midway through the event. That is something that really anchors people to your event. And it does actually increase the trust and help the conversion as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I love the way that you're approaching it differently. And that sponsorship tactic, that's what this podcast is all about. These deep, strategies. I love it. I love it. Now, how do people go about getting those sponsors? So let's say you're hosting an event. Where do you find sponsors that are interested in paying, $21,000 for that type of, privilege to be there at not just there, but also part of a sensory experience, something like that. Where do you find those types of sponsors?
So first of all, they already exist in your network and they're hungry for opportunity to connect with people in their target market. So the first thing you need to do is have a really good understanding of the demographics of the people that are going to be in your room. And I don't just mean that they're a marketing agency. We want to know their age range. We want to know their incomes, their offers, stuff like that. And the fact that when people come to my events, part of my sponsorship packages, I share with them that 90% of the people that have come into my room have purchased a high ticket offer within the last year. Their offers range anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 plus. Some of my clients have $100,000 plus offers. When sponsors hear this sort of stuff, they know that people have cash and that they would be willing to invest in things. So that's one side of things. It's like positioning your event as something that they want to come to because of the type and caliber of people that they are. So that's in your sales process for sponsors, you've got to really make it an attractive thing. The second piece of this where you find them is actually most sponsors come from within networks that you are already within. And a lot of people that have already sponsored previous events will be very open to sponsoring other events, provided you can demonstrate the value of them getting there. Any opportunity that someone has to get in front of a warm audience is much, much, much more attractive to them than spending money wasting $20,000 ads, not necessarily getting the return because they're figuring stuff out. You've already done the hard lifting for them and you're putting them in front of 250 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people that they'd be really, really happy to kind of sell to. And then the last part of this is where do you find them? Is that you ask within your network, who do people know? One of the most powerful tools that one of my coaches, Carrie, you guys might know her, Carrie Wilkerson, many, many years ago, she shared with me, I was going through a dark period in business and she's like, you have an amazing network. You go out to the people that you know and say, hey, you are my ideal client, but I want to obviously, people that are just like you. I would be wondering if you'd be if you know anyone that are just like you that would be open to sponsoring my event and if you'd be open to giving me an introduction. Now, mine wasn't in the context of sponsoring events. It was just getting clients at that time. But somebody that I went to said, absolutely, Brody, I will do anything for you. A year ago, you gave me one tip for my event that made me $1.3 million. I will do whatever you need to help out with this. And so
now are we going to be able to hear that one tip? Not right now, But do you think you could share that one tip
To
right
be
at
honest,
the end of this episode?
I forget what it was. I honestly forget what it was. I'll have to think while we're
Okay.
talking
All right.
before the end of it.
We'll see if you remember. We'll see, or you
It
might
was
just have to
something
give
to
a few
do, yeah,
tips. And
it was something to do with their pitch, but I forget exactly what it was. But
okay.
actually, I have a tip
Okay.
that will help people with this.
We'll,
I
we'll
do have
cover
another
we'll
tip.
cover those $1 million. We've got some $1 million tips coming up in a second here. We got some good tips. So not just one. We'll give a few. It might not be the exact one.
The
Okay.
last piece, sorry, on the
Oh yeah.
sponsorship, there are
Yeah.
agencies out there that will actually do the sponsorship stuff for you, and they'll take a percentage of it as well. So you can find people that are really, really good at this. One of my buddies, Chris, actually trains people on how to do this. So there's actually courses and all that sort of stuff as well.
Awesome. And so one thing that I'm curious about, it's been a recurring topic here on the podcast, is asking about the impact of AI. How do you see AI impacting events, both virtual events and live events? And I know you got some AI secret sauce, so we'll weave
Yeah.
that in, but also just overall, how are you seeing AI impact events?
I think that AI is an amazing tool, and I think that people are scared that it's going to take over, but I actually am welcoming it. I think it's a remarkable, what's the word, enhancement on everything that we're doing. And it's not at the point yet where it's going to take over anything really. It still needs intervention from us. What we're building is what we're calling our events expert AI, where we are able to basically, I've put all of my IP into it, all of my coaching calls into it on events. And we're now using it to be able to impact the experience of events in a really profound way. So I'll give you an example. So our clients use this as well. And just a really quick seed of how awesome it is. One of my clients recently collected data live at their event about their audience, about their fears, frustrations, wants, and aspirations. And then they were teaching something. I took that data, I whacked it into our events expert AI, and it pumped out a script for us to use before we pitched to them that hammered in on agitated all of their pain points, and we extracted an extra $75,000 out of the room because of what this did. So it's an amazing tool. But what I want to share is that it affects every part of your event. So it can build out all of your marketing for you. It can build out, our stuff also builds out the event itself based on our IP, and then in conjunction with our client's IP. It can build out the offer and the pitch. And how we do it is when somebody registers for one of our events, they actually speak to a voice agent. And that voice agent is trained to get data points from them. So the first part is that it captures demographic information about our actual client coming in. So who they are, type of business that they run, what some of the challenges are, the kind of goals that they have, the emotional impact of not reaching them, all of the usual things that you might get in a sales call, right? And then it also gets information about their ideal clients as well. So we talk about their ICP. And then what happens is that we have this rich, fertile field of information that we can then design our entire event around. And so then I pump it into to the AI and says, I'm doing my normal event. These are the people that are in the room. How do I run this particular session to ensure that I handle their objections and get them closer to the buyer's pocket? And it'll be like, okay, teach it how you normally do, but these are the pain points that you need to agitate. You should do this activity a little bit differently and maybe position it like this so that they're doing this or X and Y and Z and so on and so forth. We also have this amazing relationship with SimpleCheck that basically gives you information about people's purchasing capacity before they actually get to your event. And so leveraging that and the information that we have about our clients, we're doing things like we're putting people at the same table as people that are like them. And when we're making an offer, we're actually sending them to, say, for example, a sales table that's only people that we know have the cash to invest straight away. We send the people that need finance support to a different sales table based on this demographic information that we've collected. And we have the people that need financing and that don't have any money, like they can't use credit or whatever, to a different table. And what that does is that it creates an environment where the people that are purchasing with certainty because they've got the cash only mingle at the sales table with other people that have the same certainty. And we don't poison the well of people that might be uncertain and them going, oh my God, am I going to be around this person in the program? And it allows people that do have financing things to have private conversations about them as well. So back to that. Sorry, I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there.
Well, that's genius. Hold on. That's a golden nugget right there. So you are, actually understanding what people's buying capacity is And I know with Simple Check, it does some of that behind the scenes. I've heard of, different, people using that as well. I know you use that, but whatever it happens to be, there's a way to really tell, okay, is this person, a core, buyer or not, and, or at least in that like persona where they're more likely to buy. And then you're sitting them together at a table, and you're putting the people who might have some objections, financial objections. Maybe they if it's a business, the business is small or whatever it is, they're now at different tables together.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant one. That's a golden nugget right there.
And just to be clear, we do this just in the pitch session beforehand. What we do in the other sessions is, because we have all of this information about them, we can go in and use the AI and say, hey, these are the people in the room. Can you place them at tables where you think they're all going to get the best benefit of being at that table? And so we do things like facilitated deal flows and stuff like that. And based on the information, we can put people at the right table rather than doing all of that manual work ourselves and trying to figure those sorts of things out. And it's really, really, really powerful. The other thing that it kind of does as well is that once we get a sense of all of the different pain points, their fears, frustrations, wants, and aspirations, it also informs our marketing too. And so we can alter marketing based on people that we know are coming through. And when we decide to make an offer, right, when we're building out the offer, we have programs that we offer. But it will also tell us, based on the people of the room, these are the parts of the offer that you should focus on for maximum conversion, because these are the needs of the people coming into the room. Now, take this a step further. If you gather data from people at the event live, it can feed this stuff back to you before you pitch, and you can update it live based on what's happening in the room in the moment. And so it's a lot of fun to play around with this. We're in beta testing of this at the moment, but we've had some phenomenal results. I share with you what my client did. And yeah, it's a lot of fun to play with. So to answer your question, AI is a massive enhancement. It is an adjunct to all of your original amazing ideas, and it can turn these things on steroids to help you to get better results.
I love it. All right, so now take a totally different direction here, which is I know you're really focused on impact, and you share a love of space, and you've got a really big vision. And I'm not going to say any more. I'll let you share. You want to share your focus and emphasis on impact, and also the vision that I know you shared with me, with everybody who's watching or listening.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad we get to talk about this. I could talk about it all day, every day. So a few years ago, the reason why we called that $1 million event Impact was because I wanted to do something good for the world at the same time. And it was like there was a chaotic period, and we were like, how can we like give back? And so every single time somebody was touched, moved, or inspired, or they had a breakthrough at the event, we got them to type in impact into the chat, and then we would do a donation to a worthy cause. So we might provide 100 meals, we might provide a few weeks of clean drinking water. And it became this kind of emotional anchor for the people at the event to really engage. And we've done it at every single event since. Between us and our clients, we've created over 5 million impacts, or more smiles, as I say, across the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a core part of our branding now as well. Through that, there's this statement that I learned from one of my mentors. What if every time we do business, something good happens in the world? That's our philanthropic partner does that. And so we anchor that into everything that we do in our business and at our events. A few years ago, I randomly posted on my Facebook that one day I'm going to do one of our events from space. And I was like, ha ha ha, not thinking anything of it. And then the next week, one of my clients, who's now on my team, he sent me this article of a hotel that's being built in space. A hotel that houses 280 guests, 120 staff, and you can go up there for like 3.5 days. And I was like, crap, this isn't a harebrained idea anymore. This is something I have to follow through with. I'm going to do an event in space. Originally, I was going to do a mastermind, take a few people up, but after a while, like after a few months, I was like, this is kind of stale and very, very dry. Like, rich white dude goes to space. That story has been told. And of the 3 people that had at that time done it, Elon and Jeff Bezos, half the world loved and half the world hated them. And then the other guys, like Richard Branson, he's kind of like the cool uncle sort of thing. And I'm like, I don't want to be part of that club. I want to do something really different. So what we landed on eventually was something I'm calling Project Aurelius. And Aurelius is a combination of Uranus, the Greek god of the sky, and Caelus, the Roman god of the sky. And what I decided was that I was going to put on the world's largest ever modern day Live Aid style philanthropic event. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 280 people up to space, and we're going to do a broadcast to help raise money for worthy causes. And I put a number on it. And I know with certainty that we're going to reach this. We're going to raise $10 billion for worthy causes. And how we're going to do that is from the broadcast. It's going to be like a telethon, I guess, where people can donate, and I'll have governments to donate as well. That $10 billion will be invested into what I'm calling a humanity future fund. And that Humanity Future Fund is kind of like a sovereign wealth fund, like countries have, but for humanity. And then we're going to invest that into the capital markets using capitalism for good, because what if every time we do business, something good happens in the world? And that money will yield about 600 million to $1 billion, depending on the markets for that year, that every year we'll be able to donate to worthy causes or invest in people with big planet changing ideas that are moving the human race forward. And that 600 million to $1 billion will be able to be donated forever, because it will just keep growing. We won't touch the principle of the 10 billion, and we'll just be able to keep giving. And so it's turned into this thing. It's happening. The hotel, they reckon it's going to be built within the next 3 years. I call crap on that because it's space. This is like probably a decade-long thing that I'm building out. And the whole purpose of this, and if I come down to the core of what I know, is that to loop back and close the loop from the beginning, was that events have shaped every single critical thing in our human history. Political movements, social movements, like Martin Luther King, he was selling equality. Gandhi was selling peace. Jesus sold faith. Steve Jobs sold community and connection through iPhones, right? Elon Musk, like, say what you will about him at the moment, but he sells a sustainable future through electric cars and then repopulating, and like populating Mars and all that sort of stuff, doing the space stuff. And so what I'm seeing here is an opportunity to use an event to define humanity in a new way, where we can make the world work for 100% of humanity, 100% of the time, without damaging the environment or harming people. And that's the goal of Project Aroundless. And I'm so excited by it, because I think that it's going to be something very unique and different. And I can't see a way that we won't be able to get buy-in from pretty much everyone on the planet, because it is for good and it is for every single person on the planet. So that's my 10-year thing at the moment.
I love it. I remember when you first were sharing this vision over dinner, and obviously if you're watching this on YouTube, your audio, I'll just explain it. But like behind me, I've got the rocket ship in the background here, the love of shared love of space, but also creating an impact and creating a positive ripple effect in the world. And when you win, you have the ability to help others win. And so I love that. And what you're building is something really, really impactful. So excited for that.
I appreciate that. I want to add something to that as well. Can we just tie this back into events in our industry for a second?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that scares people away from doing events is like this idea, like, do I actually have anything of value to offer? And will my audience respond to me kind of being on stage? An event saved my life, a message that I heard at the right time, a conversation that I had with myself in a moment allowed me to step into something that I never dreamed possible for myself before, which was stepping into like a business environment and completing some trauma. And I just say that, I say to our clients that you have a fiduciary responsibility to humanity to be filthy rich. And the reason for that is because we want to do good with that money. And when you're in the room with people and you have a conversation with them about something important, what you're actually doing is you're altering the evolution of our species. And here's why. That person has a breakthrough, an aha moment, they're touched, moved, or inspired in some way. They're literally rewiring neural pathways in their brain. Then they go out into the world and they change the way they behave in the world as a result of that. And it's altered the molecular structure of that person and therefore the human race. And so when I say that sales saved lives, which I firmly believe, sales saved my life on multiple occasions, events also save lives as well. And events are the one thing that humanity has done for 300,000 years that have caused us to evolve. And so if you're considering doing an event, I want you to take it with the mindset that this isn't just about me making money, although I want you to make a lot of money, but it's really about having a genuine impact on the audience you serve. And who are you not to do that? Like, you're actually, if you're not doing an event yet, you're actually holding your gift back, because you don't know the person sitting in your room and the position that they're in that moment. One thing that comes out of your mouth could alter the trajectory of their life forever and change humanity forever. So please, by all means, do all of your acquisition strategies, do your funnels, do all of the other stuff, do your sales calls. My invitation to everyone is to seriously consider doing an event. We are lacking in good quality events in the industry. I'm on a mission. I'm going to create an event center of excellence where we do research on this sort of stuff. I really want us to, as an industry, to change the way we engage with our audiences so that we can have a deep and lasting impact on humanity. That's not just about getting more clients, but it's around really having a deep, deep, deep lasting impression on the people that we serve.
I love it. I love it. And really, seeing that benefit that those events have. And I know I've been transformed by events, and I think people who are watching or listening, many, if not all of them, have been touched by an event, or if not, then definitely get yourself out to a powerful event. There's a lot that have that possibility, and so I love that. And then also being the one to facilitate that. So in a second, we're going to dive into some of the strategies behind $1 million events, some of the tactics. We've been promising that. But before we get there, how can people find out about you, Brody? Like, how can they learn about what you do, helping people with events? Are there events that you have coming up? What are the best ways for people to find out more about you?
Yeah, actually, in the first week of April, I have an event called Scale with Events coming up. It's a great event. It's 4 hours where I'm going to basically introduce people to the model, and we'll obviously I'll be making an offer at that event for a new case study program that we're launching with our AI. I want to get some really good case studies, so you'll be able to get like first hands-on experience with this and create a really powerful event. You can find me on socials. Facebook, it's Brody Lee. On Instagram, it's Brody Lee Live. And on my Instagram, you'll see that I don't have many followers because I got rid of my old one, and I'm on a challenge. I'm trying to make 100,000 followers this year. It's not going that great at the moment because I haven't put that much energy into it. But Brody Lee Live, or it's Brody Lee on Facebook. You can also go to our website, eventsconsulting.co, and you can book in a call to chat with one of our event experts there.
Love it. Love it. And we're going to dive into that, those $1 million strategies in just a second. But make sure that you are subscribed to the Marketing Minds podcast, whether it's on YouTube, where we have the video podcast. We also have the video podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you find the podcast valuable, please rate it 5 stars. Really, really appreciate that. We're looking to get our ratings up so more and more people discover the podcast. 5 stars is awesome. Really appreciate that. It's going to help us in those rankings. All right. So we've been promising this, but one last thing beforehand. What have we been doing this whole time? Brody, I know this is something that you teach. It's also something that, I talk about too when it comes to YouTube content. We were both just at events that actually talked about this and even reminded me to do it even more, which is the open loop. So quickly explain to the audience that might not be aware of what we've been doing this entire episode, maybe a little bit more overtly than normally. It's usually a little more subtle, but what have we been doing this whole episode with open loops? And then we'll get into the $1 million tactics. But what is an open loop?
One of the benefits that I have of being able to do events, teaching events, is that I actually can be really open about what I'm doing with people because I want them to learn it, right? So we've kind of been doing that here. It's a little bit meta, right? Okay, so open and closed loops. When people come into your environment, in order to be able to get them into the buyer's pocket and to be willing to listen to what you have to say with an offer, you have to go through a series of closed and open loops. So the way that this used to be described was solve a problem, create a problem. I don't like that energy, but essentially what we're doing is that we're giving information, and then that information solves a challenge that somebody has, but it opens a loop for another challenge. And that open loop is like what we now say is it's a risk that's identified downstream. And so these open loops that you and I have been dropping in here is we mention something and then it gets people thinking about it and it hooks them into, hang on, I need the solution to that, or I want to hear more of it. And then we come back in later on and we close that loop for them. And when we close that loop, it's likely to open up another loop, which creates more desire. And your whole event is a series of closing and opening loops, even from your marketing right through to the internal marketing once they're registered, to the event itself. And it's, for most people, it's subtle. For me, it's very, very overt because I'm trying to train and program people about what I'm doing. And so I tell them, hey, what was that open loop that I just left? And et cetera, et cetera. And so, and I tell people, like, it's funny. One of my favorite loops to open at the beginning of an event, I normally get up on stage and it's like, my name is Brody Lee, and by lunchtime tomorrow, you're going to be begging for me to sell to you. I can get away with that. And people are like, what the hell? And I'm like, you'll understand tomorrow. And seriously, at my last 3 events, literally before lunch, I had people begging for me to sell to them because of the way in which I constructed and engineered everything up until that point. And that, like the most recent one, someone's like, can you please just sell to us already? I want to hear what the offer is. And that person bought as well. So yeah, and it's a process that actually keeps people very, very engaged and then gets them to a decision point where they are more likely to purchase.
I love it. I love it. And definitely, if you go back, this is one of those episodes where you can actually listen to it twice if you want to hear what we've been doing. I'm just kidding. You don't have to do that. But listen out for those open loops. That's what we've been doing kind of throughout. And you can hear Brody doing them, myself as well. And if you listen to the other podcasts, especially recently, I've been incorporating that more and more. So a little bit of inside baseball here for everybody. Okay. All right. We promised this from, about a third of the way into the podcast. Your $1 million tactics. This may or may not be the one that did that specific, $1.3 million of extra revenue. But what are some of your best $1 million event tactics?
Okay, so one of my favorite ones is how I program people before they come to the event to be ready to purchase. In one of the emails that I send out to people, I'm very overt and direct about the fact that I'm going to make an offer to them at the event. And in that email, I actually collapse all of their objections in the email. I'm very direct about what I'm doing, and what I'm asking them is to come to the event ready to make a decision. And so there's three things here that are really, really important. Is that your whole event is around three things and three things only: one person, one skill, and one process. So this is my tactic number one, $1 million tactic. So in this email, what I'm doing is I'm demonstrating authority in myself, saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm the most important person at my event, not participant. I am the most important person at my event. I'm also demonstrating something called frame control, where I'm asking them to look at their challenges that they're having through a particular lens and saying that the way through that challenge is to be able to make a decision about joining our program or whatever it is at the event. And then the third piece of this is the process, which is the most important part, which is the pitch itself. And so this email is actually part of the process of pitching. Like I said earlier, most people think that an event, like pitching at an event, is an event within the event, but it's actually a process that starts from the moment you conceptualize your event. It's weaved through all of your marketing and then throughout your event. And then this one person, one skill, and one process is something that you need to implement throughout your event. You are the authority, you're also the friend, you're also the leader. And so you need to demonstrate that throughout. At the event itself, you control the frame. Now, so you're constantly directing their attention where they should be thinking and what they should be thinking about. Absolutely. The other thing is that from a frame control point of view, I like to think that the person with the most flexible frame wins. And the reason for that is that when you're dancing around someone that's objecting to what you're saying, you can jab them from different angles because you have a flexible worldview on what's going on for them. Most people, when they're objecting, have a very rigid worldview. No, I can't do this. I can't afford this. And because they're only zeroing in on the zeros that they currently have in their bank account, not in the possibility of how they could create that money in the next 24 hours using some strategies or whatever. And then the process of pitching is you are constantly serving at your event, you're constantly seeding, and you're constantly selling a really compelling future to them before you even get to your pitch. And we engineer that through storytelling, through case studies, and all of those sorts of things, which because we're doing at your event next week. So that's one. Another tip. How much time do we have to go through these tips? I'm giving everything away here.
Let's keep going. I've got some more time, so let's do it.
Okay, so the other part of this is, let me go into the actual process of pitching itself. I hate when someone just slaps an offer on the table and it's just kind of like disrespectfully, oh, by the way, buy my stuff or buy my SHIT. What we want to do is we want to create desire in people in a way that is really authentic and feels really, really like, okay, cool, this is actually something that I need. And I learned this one off Tony Robbins. So I was at his events for 2 years. I saw every single pitch for 2 years, and I studied like a banshee. I had one pitch where Scott Harris was on stage. He did an hour, and in 1 hour of that pitch, I took 21 pages of notes. Like, I study these pitches. But something really interesting, if you'll notice that if you've ever been to Tony's Unleash Power Within event, the whole event is designed for them to sell you Mastery University, which is their package. But they do something really interesting before they pitch. They get you to fill out an audit, and it's not like really it's very subtle. But you do this wheel of life thing where you rate yourself on the 7 areas of his wheel of life, the 7 areas that he thinks that you need mastery in, right? And he keeps hammering home this idea of mastery. That's how you get anything in life: mastery, mastery, mastery. And then you look at your little wheel of life, and they say to you, they said, this wheel, if you had a wheel like this on your car, how would your car be traveling? This is the wheel of your life. And people go, well, my car would go off the road. And then they say, well, you need to get mastery over these things for you to be able to not go off the road of your life. And so they're doing frame control here. They're positioning Tony because he's got mastery. He's the most important person at the event. And then it's all part of their pitch process, and they lean into the Mastery University pitch. And all of those areas that you're rated low in are featured in the offer. And so what you've done is that by doing this audit, I don't like to call it an audit, but it's the easiest way to describe it. We call it a pulse check at our events. It highlights for people what's missing for them, really overtly, really clearly. And then when you present your offer, it's the solution to the problems that they have. And if you're smart, you'll frame it in a way that they absolutely need your offer, that they can't help but want that offer at the end of the event. And we saw conversions increase by 12% the first time that we introduced this. 12%. Who would want a 12% bump in their event? So really, really powerful. And then the last piece of the puzzle, so not the last piece of the puzzle, I keep saying that. There's lots of different pieces of the puzzle. The last little tactic that I will give everyone is that the fortune is in the follow-up at your events. The fortune is at the follow-up. Your sales team, and this is why we say sales teams are optional. We actually want sales teams because once the event is done, your sales team are flooded with leads, and that should make them really, really happy because they can follow up with those leads and help people make the decision that they weren't able to make on the day for whatever reason. And so outbound dialing the next day, start immediately. Get those people within that first 24 hours. And you'll be surprised by the conversions and the way in which you can increase that because they've had a one-to-one touch point with somebody. And we do this so simply. I'm not going to reveal this because it's one of my ninja hacks, but we send out a simple email and text as well. It gets people to raise their hands and reply, and then your team knows to get those people straight away. And yeah, they'd be some of my $1 million hacks.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on here, Brody. This has been fantastic. Those links that you mentioned, we'll put those down in the description below. Like I said earlier, definitely check out Brody and everything that he's doing. It's really amazing things. We're working with him on our virtual event and more events on the horizon, I'm sure. And then also make sure that if you like this episode, we dove in extra. We went a little overtime, which is awesome. Please rate it 5 stars. That's going to be amazing. Really appreciate that. Make sure you're subscribed. We will see you on the next one. Thanks so much, Brody.
Thanks, Alaric. It was great to be here.